heading into the first attempt to build some state-of-the-art facility for motor racing in Southern California. The first time that happened was in 1970 with a project known as Ontario Motor Speedway in Ontario, California. I think it was just 40 miles outside of Los Angeles, and it was almost a one-to-one scale replica of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway built in Southern California.
So let me get this straight. They straight up tried to copy, or basically did copy, the Indy 500.
Oh, with the blessing of Holman George, the owner of the speedway at the time. Like as a gift, Holman George gave to Ontario Motor Speedway enough of the original bricks from Indianapolis Motor Speedway to line their victory lane. The victory circle was lined with original bricks from Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Bloody hell! That is some interesting attention to detail right there.
But there were two key differences in Ontario compared to Ontario and Indianapolis. Ontario was it was a lane wider than Indianapolis, so it was the same layout but wider, and also the short straights between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 were also banked, so speeds were much higher at Ontario.
Jeez, that sounds pretty crazy. So, King, I'm waiting for the bad news here.
Well, Dre, have you ever heard of Ontario Motor Speedway before today?
Nope.
We're gonna get to that bad news very quickly, because Ontario Motor Speedway was state-of-the-art, and it was built in only 22 months.
That sounds ridiculous.
It opened in 1970. It was the first racetrack in the world with electronic timing and scoring, which is like now ubiquitous today. It was the first racetrack with luxury boxes, or like anything resembling a paddock club today was the first, circuit with that. It was meant to be the thing that would take racing to the next level, because in the United States, we'd never had anything near a major city, let alone the second largest city in the country. Like, I think opening day for the Speedway was November 1970. Actually, September 1970, with the inaugural California 500. It was an IndyCar race, and they built it up so much they got as many Hollywood stars as they could to show up for the race, because they wanted Ontario to be the place to be, because they invested so much money into this. I think, who were the movie stars that they had? I know they had Garner. He was the star of the 1966 film Grand Prix.
Oh yeah.
They also had John Wayne show up.
Oh wow.
Also, Kirk Douglas. If you don't know Kirk Douglas, he played Spartacus in Stanley Kubrick's film Spartacus.
Mm-hmm.
And the California 500, the inaugural California 500, had the largest turnout on the calendar, on the IndyCar calendar. The only race that had a higher attendance was obviously the Indianapolis 500.
I'm guessing, I'm waiting for the wheels to fall off this, King. It hasn't quite happened yet.
Yes, they asked the FIA if they could host a second U.S. Grand Prix besides Watkins Glen. The FIA said that, if you host a non-championship race in the 1971 season, you could host a second U.S. Grand Prix if it goes well, and you decide to pay the fees to host the race. Next year, they host this non-championship Quester Grand Prix, because I think Quester Industries was the name of the company that built the track. Mm-hmm. So they host a race. They also knock it out of the ballpark. I think they had the second highest attendance of any race on the 1971 calendar, despite being a non-championship race. Only the British Grand Prix had a higher attendance that year, and that race was also won by a then fairly young Mario Andretti as a rookie at Ferrari.
Wow. That seems pretty nuts. That does seem pretty nuts. Go on.
They also got a race date on the NASCAR calendar and ended up being the second highest attended event on the NASCAR calendar, only second to the Daytona 500. And the race was a huge success, and they ended up being the season finale on the NASCAR calendar until 1980. And unfortunately, things started to fall apart.
I was gonna say, Helena, this is going far too well. Are you getting this impression right now?
Yes.
No, yeah. No, it's interesting. I'm kidding.
So
no, I'm not kidding.
Things started to fall apart because the Speedway was extremely expensive to build, and also, the Speedway was built using bonds, so they had to, it was basically a loan. They had to pay back the loan. So, while the attendance to the Quester Grand Prix was great, it wasn't as high as they expected it to be. So, they decided, yeah, that F1 race that we hoped for, yeah, we're just going to throw that away. We're not going to host it because it would be too expensive. We're not going to be able to make the money back fast enough. The California 500, also, the attendance started to trickle back. Like, yes, they were still getting massive crowds, but they couldn't make the money back.
Oh dear.
NASCAR, same story. Attendance great, but they couldn't make the money back. Little did they know that the value of the land that the Speedway was sitting on had actually gone up by, I think, about 10 times the value that it was. So they had bought the land the Speedway was on for about $1,000. By the end of the 1970s, that land was about $10,000 an acre.
Yikes! That is a huge. That's a huge price hike right there.
Yes. So what had happened was they did not know this either.
Yep. Go on.
So, an oil company, Chevron Oil Company, had eventually, when the Speedway started failing it, and the Speedway was like, they would, sell it to an oil company, because of course they would want races to happen there because they're an oil company. So they ended up buying the Speedway for $10,000. They ended up buying the Speedway for $10 million. The actual value of the land the Speedway was on was $120 million.
Yikes. So I'm guessing they just ended up selling the land back, didn't they?
Yes, after the end of the 1980 NASCAR season, which that season finale at Ontario, it didn't sell out, but some small rookie, his name was Dale Earnhardt, won his first race there.
He turned out all right, didn't he?
Yeah, and also Richard Petty won the last of his 7 titles there.
Okay.
Yeah, after that race, Chevron demolished the Speedway.
It's like, hey, this racetrack is getting in the way of our vast, expensive land.
So they demolished the Speedway. They demolished the Speedway and sold off the land for the money. I think today a hotel and a shopping mall are there.
Again, it turned out all right in the end, didn't it?
Yeah, and I think one of the people on the Speedway board of directors decided in the 1990s to build a new Speedway 2 miles away, but obviously it wasn't the same. That Speedway director on the board, his name was Roger Penske, and he decided to build what is now Auto Club Speedway 2 miles from Ontario.
Roger Penske always ends up being in every one of these stories in some capacity. It's crazy. It's like,
and that second USGP date that was supposed to go to Ontario, it ended up going to this small California coast city. It was a port city called Long Beach. So generally, Ontario was what could have been for American racing. It was a state-of-the-art venue, first of its kind in many ways, probably set the precedent for every other circuit to be built after it, but it only lasted for a decade, and it never really had any low points. It had it had, top racing across the board, and they never really had any race days that went underattended. It just they couldn't make back the money that they loaned to build it, and they did for whatever reason overlooked the value of the land the track was sitting on, and it all just went away in a blink of an eye.
And instead, we got left with Long Beach. Great.
Yes.